There you are. Don't worry. I knew you'd find your way back to me tonight. The rain has been guiding you all evening, tapping at your windows, nudging at your thoughts, reminding you that this little tower still exists at the edge of your mind. You don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to explain why you're tired or what kept you awake last night or the night before that. All you have to do for now is listen to the rain and let your body remember what it feels like to be safe for a little while. Take a slow breath in for me. Gently, nothing forced. Hold it just for a moment, and then let it fall out of you like water running off a stone. Good. You're doing perfectly. You know me already, but let me say it again for the part of you that forgets when it's tired. I'm Elara. Once the healers in the city called me a heretic for mixing their clean little remedies with the old ways, with stars, with symbols, with herbs that didn't fit neatly into their books. So I moved my work out here to this crooked tower at the edge of the forest, where no one bothers me, and only those who truly need rest ever find their way to my door. Tonight, you're one of them, and I'm very glad you're here. Tonight, I'm brewing something special for you, something old, something the monks once whispered about when they thought no one was listening. They used to call it the herb that made people forget. You won't need to move. You won't even need to keep your eyes open. Just stay right where you are and let me work. I'll grind the herbs, I'll watch the fire, and while my hands are busy, I'll tell you the story of what this plant once did to the hearts of those who drank it, and what I have changed so it can watch over your sleep without stealing anything from you. I've lit the coals in the brazier just enough to keep the room warm and to wake up the oils in the herbs. Can you hear it? That soft crackle under the rain? That's the sound of the charcoal settling, glowing, getting ready to help me work. Around us, the tower is exactly as you left it the last time you visited. Stone walls, round and patient, holding the night at a comfortable distance. Shelves full of bottles and jars, each with its own little world, sealed inside roots, leaves, petals, seeds that remember summers no one alive can remember anymore. And here, on this worn wooden table between us, is the bowl I chose for you tonight. It's a simple mortar carved from pale stone, cool under my fingers. You can imagine it, if you like, smooth, heavy, made to hold secrets. Inside, I've already placed a small handful of dried flowers. Tiny things. Their petals used to be white in the garden, but time and sun turned them into this faint, uncertain colour somewhere between ash and the soft purple of a bruise that no longer hurt. I'm adding a few more now. Just enough for one night, for one restless mind. You might hear them as they fall, that dry, papery whisper. They're eager to dissolve into something warm for you. You don't have to picture any of this if your eyes are already heavy. You can simply let my voice draw the shapes for you, while you drift in that soft place between waking and sleep. All right, I'm going to start grinding the petals now. The sound might be familiar. You've heard it here before, stone against stone, slow and steady, like a small wheel turning somewhere deep inside your chest. I press down gently with the pestle and circle and circle and circle. Each turn breaks the petals into something softer, lighter, more willing to let go. A little like you tonight. The monks I studied with had so many names for this plant. Some of them called it the herb of mercy because it dulled the edges of grief for people who could not stop weeping. Others called it the coward's flower because it let soldiers sleep without facing the faces they had left behind. But the name that stayed with me most was the quiet one, the one they only whispered when the candles were low and they thought the younger apprentices were already dreaming. They called it the herb that made people forget. I remember hearing that for the first time and feeling something cold settle under my ribs. Not all forgetting is kindness. Not all sleep is healing. Even then, with ink on my fingers and dust in my hair, I wondered what kind of hurt would drive someone to ask a plant to take their memories away. But don't worry, I'm not brewing that version for you. The cup I'm preparing tonight is gentler than anything they would have dared to make. It won't erase your stories. It will simply ask them to speak more softly for one night, so your mind can rest without losing itself. There, that's fine enough. The petals are almost a powder now, soft as dust on a forgotten windowsill. If you listen closely, you might even hear them sigh a little as they settle at the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to pour some warm water over them soon. Let their stories seep out into something you can drink. But before I do that, I want you to rest your body just a little more. Let your shoulders slide down. away from your ears. Let your jaw unclench. If your tongue is pressed to the roof of your mouth, let it fall. Your hands don't have to hold on to anything right now. They can be as lazy as cats by the fire. That's it. Just like that. You're doing very well. Nothing is required of you here. You're safe here. This tower has no clocks, no obligations, no one waiting for an answer. Just the rain, the fire, and an old alchemist who has seen more sleepless nights than she can count. I'm going to tell you now about the first time I saw this herb used to wipe the edge off a man's memories. It was in the garden of a monastery, far from the noise of any town, where the bell tower cut the sky into quiet pieces of morning and evening. There was a scribe there, a tired monk with ink always drying on his hands. Every night, by the light of a single, shivering candle, he sat at a wooden desk and wrote down the names of those who had died that day. Line after line, page after page, the dead passed through his ink on their way into the records of the living. He had written so many names that sometimes, when he dipped his quill, he could not remember whether the one he was about to write belonged to a stranger or to himself. You don't have to stay awake to hear everything that happened to him. Let the story drift in and out like the sound of the rain. Let whatever your heart needs be the part that lingers. When I close my eyes, I can still see that monastery. Not the parts people brag about, not the tall stone church, or the coloured glass, or the carved saints on the doors. What I remember most is the garden behind the walls. The air there always smelled of wet earth and crushed leaves, even on days when the sky was dry. Beds of herbs grew in careful rows: sage, mint, feverfew, plants for bellies, plants for fevers, plants for broken bones and broken hearts. And in one crooked corner of that garden, half in shade, half in sun, grew the herb we're talking about tonight. The one the monks were almost afraid to name. Back then, I was only a guest in that place, a little too curious for the city physicians and a little too stubborn for the brothers in brown. They let me tend the herbs because my hands were gentle and my tongue was not. And it was in that garden that I first met the monk who wrote The Dead. His name, well, the brothers had a name for him, but to me, he was simply the scribe. Every day, he moved like a shadow between the church, the refectory, and a narrow little room lined with shelves and desks. The scriptorium. You would have liked it there. Long tables, smooth from years of elbows and ink, quills resting in chipped cups, ink pots black as midnight, parchment stacked like quiet snow. The scribe sat at the same place near the end of the room, close enough to the single window to borrow what little light he could from the grey sky. By day, he copied psalms and prayers in a hand so neat it looked almost like print. By night, when his brothers went to sleep, he did a different kind of work. In the evenings, after the last bell had faded, the scribe would carry a small lamp back to his desk. The flame made a trembling island of gold in the sea of dark. He would open a thin, heavy book, the Registry of the Dead, and there, line by patient line, he wrote down the names of those who had died that day. The old, the sick, the lost on the road, the ones taken by fever before they could be seen by any healer at all. Each name was a tiny funeral held in ink. He never rushed. He formed every letter as if that soul were watching his hand. But even devotion has a weight. Over the years, those names began to cling to him, like wet wool on his shoulders, like smoke in his lungs. At first, no one noticed. The scribe was always quiet, always pale, always a little thin. But then the brothers began to see small changes. At meals, he would forget whether he had already bowed his head for the blessing. In the cloister, he would move past people he knew without seeming to see them, his eyes tracking something only he could see on the flagstones. And at night, from the rooms near the scriptorium, monks began to hear the scratch of the quill long after the lamp should have gone dark. One evening, I brought him a small pot of salve for the ink stains on his fingers. He looked down at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. There are days, he said, when I dip the quill and I can't remember if the name I'm about to write is theirs or mine. His voice wasn't frightened, just tired, so very, very tired. Sleep had begun to slip away from him. When he closed his eyes, he didn't see darkness. He saw lines of text marching across his thoughts, names he had written, names he might write tomorrow, names he hadn't written yet, but somehow already knew would find their way onto those pages. He would wake with his fingers curled as if still holding a pen, his pillow faintly dusted with specks of dried ink. The brothers worried, in their quiet, careful way. A man who cannot sleep cannot pray for long. A man who carries the dead into his dreams will not last many winters. So they did what people often do when they love someone and do not know how to help. They came to the garden. They came to me. We stood together by that crooked patch of earth where the pale flowers grew. Their petals were already curling at the edges, summer giving itself up to the first hints of autumn. One of the elder monks wouldn't quite look at me when he spoke. He only said softly, "The scribe cannot go on like this. His mind is too full. He needs a night without names. His eyes flicked down to the herb at our feet, the herb that made people forget. I knew what they were asking for, even if they didn't say it plainly. Not a cure for his pain, but a curtain to draw across it for a little while. So I knelt, and I gathered the flowers, one by one, their stems cool and damp, against my fingers. I told myself it would only be for a single night, just enough to let his mind catch its breath. Here, with you. I'm not brewing it that way. But back then, I followed their wishes. I dried the petals by the kitchen fire, ground them the way I did for you tonight, and mixed them with warm water and a little honey to soften the taste. When I brought the cup to the scribe's small cell, he was sitting on his bed with the registry open in his lap, lamplight trembling on the page. His eyes were red around the edges, the way yours get on the nights when you swear you're fine, but your body tells me otherwise. Before I tell you what he chose, let your body soften again for me. You've been walking around his story as if you were there in those stone halls. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper. Let your breath slide in and out without any effort. You don't have to carry his names. You don't even have to remember his. For tonight, you can let my memories do the walking while you rest. The cup I brought to him that night was nothing special to look at. Just plain clay, glazed the colour of river mud, chipped a little at the rim. But it was warm in my hands, and the steam that rose from it carried the scent you know so well by now, old pages, rain on stone, and a sweetness that didn't quite belong to honey or to flowers, but to something in between. I set it down beside him on the narrow ledge that passed for a desk in his little cell. The registry of the dead lay open in his lap, a single name half written, ink still wet on the page. His lamp shook a little in the draught, and the light made his eyes look even more tired than they were. "I've brought you something," I said. He glanced at the cup, then at me, then back at the cup again. "The brothers asked you to do this?" There was no accusation in his voice, just a soft surprise, as if he had not expected anyone to notice how thin his nights had become. "Yes," I told him, but I agreed for my own reasons. I folded my hands in front of me so he wouldn't see how tightly I was holding my worry. "I think," I said, "there are limits to how many names one mind can carry without breaking. Just for tonight, let this one cup carry them for you." He looked down at his ink-stained fingers, then at the names on the page. "I used to think," he murmured, "that remembering them was my offering, that if I held their names long enough in my thoughts, they would walk more easily into the next world." His hand hovered above the book, as if he meant to close it and could not quite bring himself to do it. What if I drink this and I can't remember them tomorrow? I shook my head, settling myself on the little stool by his bed. "Listen to me," I said, keeping my voice as soft as the steam rising from the cup. "You are not a gate they must pass through. You are a witness, nothing more. The ink has already taken their names. The pages remember even when you do not. If your mind breaks, no one will be served by that. Not the living, not the dead." He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, almost like a sob. "You talk like someone who has seen too much," he said. "I talk like someone who doesn't want to lose another sleepless soul to their own devotion," I answered. Then, more gently, "This is not forever. This is one night of quiet. If you find you miss the weight of the names, you can pick it up again tomorrow. Grieve is not a duty you have to hold every hour of every day." He was silent for a while. The only sounds were the rain on the eaves, the very soft crackle of the lamp, and somewhere far off, the drip, drip, drip of water in the cloister. Finally, he closed the registry, sliding a scrap of parchment between the pages where the wet ink still shone. He wrapped his hands around the cup as if testing its warmth. "Just for tonight," he whispered. "Just one night without names." And then he drank. The herbs take their time. They don't rush, even when our pain does. I watched him as he set the empty cup aside, as he lay back on his narrow bed, still in his robe, head sinking into a pillow that had seen too many restless hours. His eyes stayed open for a while, fixed on a crack in the ceiling, following the path of some thought he didn't share aloud. Then his blinking slowed, his breaths lengthened. Outside, the rain thickened, softening every sound in the stone corridors. The lamp by his bed burned lower, its flame curling in on itself like a tired cat. Usually, this was the time when the names would come. They would line up behind his eyes, the weak, the wounded, the ones no one had claimed. They would march across the inside of his skull in thin black letters, asking to be written one more time. But that night, the line did not form. The doorway in his mind, where they gathered, remained strangely, blessedly empty. He drifted down past the place where the names usually waited for him, past the bright, restless layer of thought, into something deeper, darker, quieter. Not a pit, not a fall, just water. If you've ever slipped into a lake at night, you know the feeling. The way the surface closes gently over your shoulders, the way sound changes. Everything muffled, everything distant, your heartbeat loud and slow in your own ears. That is how sleep took him that night. No visions, no lines of ink, no faces turning toward him in the dark, just the soft, almost weightless quiet of a mind that has finally been allowed to stop. Morning in a monastery comes early, whether you're ready or not. The bell called the brothers to prayer at the edge of the grey light, as it always did. But for the first time in years, the scribe did not wake to it. He slept through the first bell, and the second, and the gentle knock of a novice sent to fetch him. They told me later they stood in his doorway, watching his chest rise and fall, slow and even like the tide. They left him there, unable to bring themselves to break whatever spell had finally loosened his grip on the night. When he did wake, the sun was already a pale coin high in the sky. The lamp at his bedside had gone out on its own, a trail of smoke still clinging to the air like the last line of a prayer. For a long moment he simply lay there, blinking up at the ceiling, as if he had been dropped gently back into his life from a very great height. His body felt heavy, but not in the punishing way it had before, more like a cloak that finally fit him, instead of one he was drowning in. He told me later that when he first tried to recall his dreams, there was nothing. No half-remembered faces, no pages, no ink, just a soft grey blankness, like morning fog over the fields. For a moment, that frightened him. What kind of mind woke from sleep with no images at all? But then, in the quiet after that fear, he noticed something else. The tightness in his chest, the feeling of always being one name away from breaking it, was gone. The buzzing behind his eyes, the way his thoughts used to run in thin little tracks of text, also gone. In their place was a stillness he had almost forgotten was possible. He sat up, and the movement did not bring with it the usual avalanche of remembered names. Of course, there was a cost. But that, I think, is a part of the story I will save for a moment, so your mind doesn't reach for it too quickly. For now, just stay with this. A man, after years of drowning in other people's endings, wakes into a morning that is finally mercifully quiet. Let your own thoughts take a step back with him. You don't have to fill every corner of your mind tonight. You're allowed to have a little empty space, too. When I saw him the next day, he was standing in the garden, not in the scriptorium, not hunched over a desk, but out among the herbs, as if he had followed the scent of earth instead of the smell of ink. The light made him look almost like a different man. There was colour in his face again, a faint, uncertain pink under the thin skin of his cheeks. The shadows under his eyes were softer, less like bruises, more like the gentle hollows time leaves on all of us. He turned when he heard me crush a bit of gravel under my boots. "Elara," he said, and there was something surprised in his own voice, as if it had been a long time since he'd heard it sound that rested. I slept. Just that. 2 words offered like a confession, like a miracle. I smiled at him. "I can see that," I answered. "How does your head feel?" He tilted his face up toward the sky, closing his eyes as if listening inward. "Quiet," he said at last. "Strange, but quiet." We walked between the herb beds for a little while, our robes brushing the leaves, releasing small clouds of scent, mint, thyme, rosemary. At first, he spoke of simple things, the way the light fell different on the stones, how sharply he could hear the birds in the cloister now that the buzzing in his skull had gone. Then, slowly, his words began to catch on little gaps. "I went to the refectory," he said, "and brother, he paused, frowning a little. He could see the man in his mind, the shape of his shoulders, the way he laughed at his own jokes, but the name would not come. "It's all right," I told him. "That happens. Names slip away from everyone." But he shook his head, more sharply this time. "No, you don't understand. Last night, or was it the night before, I wrote his name, right there, on the page of the dead." His hand lifted, sketching the shape of a line in the air, as if he could still see the stroke of the quill. "I can picture the letters. I can see the ink drying. I remember the way my wrist ached at the end of the line. But when I reached for the sound of his name," he opened his fingers slowly, as if releasing something that refused to stay in his palm. "There's nothing there." He brought a hand to his chest, lightly, as if checking whether something inside had gone missing. "I thought the herb would only take the weight of the names," he said softly. "I didn't know it might steal the thread that ties them to my tongue." I could have lied to him, told him it was all in his head, that no plant could touch something as delicate as a man's memory. But I have never believed that comfort built on lies is comfort at all. So instead, I walked a little slower, letting the silence settle between us. "The herb does what it has always done," I said. "It softens edges. It blurs sharp corners. You asked it, we asked it, to blunt the cutting weight of those names. It seems it has done exactly that." He sank down onto the low stone wall that edged the path, folding his hands in his lap. "The strange part is," he said, "I can remember the shapes of their lives better today than I have in months. The woman who used to bring bread for the poor, I can see the way she brushed flour off her apron, how she always tucked a loose curl behind her ear. The boy from the village, the one with a crooked smile, I remember how he tried not to cry when the fever took his sister. All those small things, they're clearer now." He looked up at me, brows drawn. "It's just the names that are fading, as if the letters were the heaviest part, and the herb carried those away first." I sat beside him, letting my shoulder almost touch his, but not quite. "Then perhaps," I said quietly, "what matters most has stayed. The names belong to the records. The lives belong to you. You remember how they smiled, how they wept, how they walked on this earth. If the price of rest was to loosen your grip on a few syllables, I cannot say the bargain was entirely unkind." He let out a long breath, and for a moment his face eased. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know this for the first time in years. I am not afraid to go to bed tonight." When I think back on that season of my life, I still feel a small knot of guilt tighten under my ribs. Not because I regret giving the scribe one night of peace, but because I didn't yet understand how precisely herbs can redraw the lines inside the mind. I thought I was offering him only sleep. I hadn't realized I was also holding a blade fine enough to shave away thin slivers of who he thought he was. Back here in this tower with you, I have had years to make peace with that mistake. I've learned how to ask the plants for gentler favors, how to brew the same herb so it coaxes the thoughts to grow softer without cutting any reds they still need. The cup I'm making for you is not the cup I made for him. Yours will not steal your names or blur the faces you love. It will simply turn down the volume on the shouting parts of your mind and invite the quieter rooms to open their doors. You see, that's the secret they never taught in the monastery. Rest is not the absence of memory. It's the art of putting each memory in the right room for the night, closing the doors on the ones that keep pacing the halls, and leaving a candle with the ones who are ready to sleep beside you. So, as you listen, you don't have to worry that this story will make you forget anything you truly need. Your mind is wiser than you think. It will keep what belongs to you and let the rest drift away like ink washed gently from a tired hand. Let your shoulders soften again. Let your breath spread out and slow. You're here, not in those stone halls. You're in my tower, with the rain, the fire, and a cup that asks nothing of you except to sleep. The scribe kept coming to the garden after that first night. Not every day. He still had his work, his prayers, his thin little room with its stacks of parchment, but often enough that I began to think of him as one of the herbs, a familiar shape among the rows, growing and changing in ways you only notice if you look closely. He never asked for the forgetting herb again. Sometimes he would linger by that crooked patch of earth, watching the pale flowers sway in the breeze. I could see the question settle on his tongue, then lift away unsaid. One night had been enough. Years later, other people found their way to me. Not monks, but men and women with battle in their bones, soldiers who had marched too far, who had seen too much fire and too much blood. They came with hands that shook when they tried to drink, with eyes that snapped open in the dark at sounds that weren't really there. They did not carry the names of the dead in ink and parchment. They carried them in scars and echoes, in the way their breath caught at the mention of certain roads, certain hillsides, certain songs. Some of them begged me to erase entire years. "Take away the battles," they said. "Take away the marches, the screams, the smoke. Leave me with the before and the after, but cut out the middle." I thought of the scribe, of the way a few missing names had left him feeling hollow and uncertain, and I knew I could never swing that blade so wide again. Back here, in this tower, I began to change the way I worked. I still used the herb that made people forget, but I stopped asking it to take anything away. Instead, I asked it to wrap certain memories in a softer cloth, to quiet the colors, to dim the edges, so they would no longer flash so brightly whenever the mind closed its eyes. I learned how to pair it with other plants, with herbs that cool anger, with roots that steady the heartbeat, with flowers that remind the body how to unclench. All of them together don't erase the story. They just lower the lanterns, so the story's no longer burning holes in the dark. That is the brew I make for soldiers now, and for weary travelers, and for those whose hearts have been carrying too much weight for too long. Not a potion of forgetting, but a potion of gentler remembering. The nights when they drink it, they still dream, but the sharpest scenes move farther away, as if viewed through a veil of rain. The sounds grow softer, the edges blur, and the part of them that has stood on alert for so many years finally believes, for a few hours, that it is allowed to stand down. And now, here you are. You haven't marched through battlefields, perhaps, or written the dead into heavy books. But your mind has its own campaigns, its own long nights, its own lists of worries it keeps trying to recite in the dark. I can feel how tired you are, even from here. The way your thoughts keep circling the same few questions, the same few fears, like crows around a lonely tree. I'm pouring the water now over the crushed petals at the bottom of the bowl. The colours spread slowly, a faint, cloudy gold, threaded with hints of purple from the bruised petals. The scent rises with the steam, curling through the air until it reaches you. Old pages, rain on stone, and that soft sweetness that never quite decides whether it wants to be flower or honey. I'm adding just a touch of something else as well. A calmer of heartbeats, a friend to frayed nerves. Nothing heavy, nothing that will drag you down. Just enough to remind your body what it already knows how to do. To loosen, to soften, to sleep. When you're ready, imagine your hands curving around the warmth of the cup. Feel the heat seep into your fingers, into the small aching places in your palms and wrists. Bring it closer, slowly, and breathe in. You don't even have to imagine the taste if you don't want to. The scent alone is enough to start the work. Before this night is over, your mind will try one more time to tell you its stories. It may bring up little scenes from the day, a conversation, a worry, a look on someone's face you haven't quite stopped replaying. That's all right. You don't have to push them away. You also don't have to follow them. Just imagine each thought arriving at the door to a quiet hallway. Some of them you can nod to politely and let pass. Yes, I see you. Not tonight. Others, the gentler ones, you can invite into rooms with soft chairs and low lamps. Let them sit there without asking anything of you until they, too, grow sleepy and fade. All the while, the rain keeps falling against the tower stones. Each drop a tiny hand tapping you further away from the day. Your shoulders have grown heavier, haven't they? Your jaw, your brow, the space between your eyes, all softening, all sliding down into rest. If your thoughts start to circle again, you can always come back to simple things. The sound of the rain, the warmth of the cup, the steady, patient rhythm of your own breath. You don't need to stay to the very end of this story. You don't have to hear every word I say. This is not an exam. Nothing here will be taken from you if you fall asleep before I finish. In fact, that is exactly what all of this is for. The scribe, the soldiers, the herbs, the tower, they are only a quiet road your mind can walk down until it is tired enough to lie down beside them. So let yourself drift. Let the rain get a little farther away. Let my voice become softer, more distant. like someone telling a story in the next room while you fall asleep by the fire. Your body knows what to do now. Your thoughts can loosen their grip. You are safe. You are held. You can rest